so glad you're here and welcome to my September reading wrap up. And Lance wants to say hi. I've read so many fun books this month. I'm so excited to chat about them. I ended up reading 7 books this month. 3 of them were mystery thriller, 3 of them were fantasy, and 1 of them was literary fiction. So clearly I was trying to get in the fall mood because those are the most fall-y genres ever. My cat is currently lying on my pile of books. The very first book that I started off the month of September with was A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas, and this is the 3rd book in the ACOTAR series. I can't say too much about this book without spoiling because it is the 3rd in a series, but this one primarily revolves around the war in the series. So it has a lot of war politics and stuff like that in it, which I surprisingly really enjoyed. One thing that I've noticed specifically about the 2nd and 3rd books in the ACOTAR series is that sometimes they get a little bit repetitive and with very sequential tasks, basically. Like, first you have to talk to this person, and then you have to talk to this person, and then you have to get this magical thing from this person so that you can talk to this person. Kind of just feels like you're following a little task list. So sometimes that would get a little bit boring and repetitive for me, but this book definitely broke the mold of that at the end. It was so intense, I cried. But I love the characters in this book, and specifically I love the found family aspect to this book. I think it's really cute to read about. In the 2nd book in the ACOTAR series, you get introduced to a bunch of new characters. In this book, you really get to understand these characters and learn more about them. I also loved the beginning of this book specifically because I love when characters are in situations where they have to lie about who they are or lie and fake things, and that was what happened at the beginning of this book, so I loved that part. Overall, I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I do highly recommend the series. It's such a fun series to just binge, although very long books. Then to go along with that, I ended up picking up A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is the novella in the ACOTAR series. It's technically not a full book. It's considered 3.5, so it comes after the 3rd book but before the 4th book, but it's not a full standalone book. And this book basically follows the winter solstice, which to me feels like their Christmas. It feels like reading a Christmas special or like watching a Christmas special of one of your favorite shows. From my understanding, this is more of a transitionary novel because it transitions into the 2nd half of the ACOTAR story, which are the last 3 books. In those last 3 books, there are different points of view, so you aren't getting the same POV in the 1st book, and in this book it kind of transitions you to that because there are multiple points of view in here. I did think it was kind of weird because some of the points of view are in 1st person and then some of them are in 3rd person. So it was kind of weird like reading 1st person and then the next chapter you get 3rd person. It was kind of like a jarring switch when reading this book. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I don't think it's completely necessary, to be honest. It didn't really add a lot new plot wise. I still enjoyed it. I ended up not picking up the next ACOTAR book because I needed a little bit of a break from the world, but now I'm actually very excited to get back into it. So maybe this month I'll pick up the last ACOTAR book. After that, I ended up picking up Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera, and this book was really fun. I gave it 3 stars. It basically follows a girl named Lucy who is accused of murdering her best friend Savvy, and 5 years later she has moved away from home because everyone there thinks of her as a murderer, and she's finally felt like she can put this behind her until a podcaster brings the case back up and to light to research it and figure out if Lucy actually did it, because the twist is Lucy cannot remember anything from that night. Overall, I enjoyed the book. I thought of it as a little bit predictable and a little bit slow at times. Kind of just uncover a little bit more as you go through Lucy regaining memories or interviewing other people who were there. I really enjoyed the podcast aspect of it because I love podcasts and books, specifically listening to them because it sounds like you're listening to an actual podcast. So I do highly recommend the audiobook for this one because it was really fun listening to the podcast. That was probably my favorite part of this entire book. But there was one aspect of this book that I hated, like hated. And that's one of the reasons why it is 3 stars, because at the end of the day it was a little bit like whatever, I'm not gonna remember it. It was fun at the time, but it was nothing mind-blowing. But the romance aspect of this book killed me. No, I found it to be incredibly, number 1, just inappropriate timing, like you're solving a murder. Number 2, weird, so weird. Chapter 40 so weird. And number 3, I just didn't like it. That's it. I didn't like it. It took me out of the book and it ruined it for me a little bit. That's my hot take though, because some people probably enjoyed that, just not for me. Then I picked up We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kluwer, and oh my god, this book was crazy. I ended up giving it 4 stars and I have thoughts about it. This book follows a couple who just moved into a fixer-upper house. They're really excited to fix it up. It's their first new place together. And then one night, a man shows up with his family and he says, I used to live here, and he wants to show his family around where he grew up. Normally, like, you wouldn't think that's too weird. I mean, even I've thought about maybe going back to my childhood homes and being like, hey, can I walk around? But it also is creepy at the same time. My cat's tail just coming in and out. I love that. But basically, after they show up, a bunch of crazy, weird stuff starts happening. The whole book just feels eerie and off-putting, and you just feel like something is off the entire time. You're questioning everything you're thinking. The characters are questioning everything they're thinking. You don't know what's real. It's just an intense read. Very scary. Like, I actually genuinely got scared by this book. Maybe part of that was because I was reading it home alone. Don't recommend that. If you like the movie Us, this book gives Us vibes in terms of like the doppelgangers and home invasion vibes. It's a horror novel that takes real fears and integrates them into the horror book. The whole thing was just immaculately done. Truly, it was really, really good. At the end of each chapter, they include documents, and at the end, all these documents tie together and you understand, and it's really just so cool, so interesting. I will say though, the reason it can't be 5 stars for me is because I had so many questions at the end. Sometimes something that I notice that mystery thrillers do is that they'll add so many little pieces of the story and then they don't really tie the beautiful bow at the end. You kind of are left with a lot of loose ends and a lot of questions, and that was me with this book. I closed the book and I was like, hold on, like, I don't know anything still. I was satisfied with the ending, but I also wasn't, because I had so many questions. I feel like it's the kind of book that you need to read it over to fully get each little detail, because I fully believe I probably missed some of the answers too. There was just so much going on, but I feel like it needs a sequel or something. I know it's turning into a movie, which is crazy because I don't know if I'm ready to visualize any of the stuff in the book. I'm very excited. After that, I picked up the first book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I was really excited to start this book because I've heard such good things, and also because there was a show out that I really wanted to watch. This book follows a high schooler named Pip, and she's doing her capstone project on a murder that happened at her school a few years ago. It was the murder of Andy Bell, one of the most popular girls, and people speculated that it was her boyfriend Sal who murdered her because he committed suicide shortly after and sent a text to his dad confessing to the murder. But Pip does not think that's true, so she wants to research and figure out who really murdered Andy Bell. Overall, the writing of this book was just so entertaining. They included the actual documents that she was talking about so you could read along with her. They included text. They did fun things with the text, like having it trickle down for emphasis. The audiobook of this one was also really fun because every time Pip would interview someone, you would get a different voice for them. It kind of sounded similar to the podcast that I mentioned earlier. Overall, it was just a really fun book to read and feel like you're solving this murder alongside them. However, I ended up giving it 4 stars because the twist at the end I hated. I hated what happened at the end. It was just so disgusting, to be honest. I also did not love something that they included in this book, because I hate when books include this certain thing. I feel like people who read will probably understand what it is. I just feel like it's unnecessary and it makes me sad. So I don't like when they do that. Also, I just thought it was so funny that these are 19-year-old kids going into potentially murderers' homes alone and somehow coming out alive. Like, this just does not feel realistic, but I understand it's not supposed to. So I ended up giving it 4 stars, and then I was so excited to watch the show afterwards, but I hate to tell you, I hate the show so much. If you liked the show, read the book. It's 10 times better. It's way more organized. The show was horribly organized, so hard to follow as someone who read the book and I like know what's going on. I'm like, you're hardly introducing these characters. You're hardly introducing any of the actual plot. I just cannot express how much I did not like this show. I couldn't even finish it, and I feel like it's made me realize why I don't like when books get adapted into TV shows, because it's never good. It's never as good. It's so hard to find a good adaptation. Like, The Summer I Turned Pretty was such a good adaptation. That one's better than the books, but not everything's like that. Like, most of them are horrible. This was one of the cases where it was horrible, and I will not be watching any more seasons of the show. I cannot watch the show. I couldn't even finish the first season. Okay, let go. Then I ended up picking up The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry, and let me tell you, this is my favorite book this month. I ended up giving it 5 stars. This is my second 5-star read this year, so it is a big deal. This book is about a man called AJ, and he lives on an island called Alice, and he owns the only bookstore on this island. Then something tragic happens in his life, and the only thing that's really keeping him going is this collection of short stories that he owns, because they are very, very expensive, until one of them gets stolen, and then his bookstore stops doing well, so he's kind of just going downhill. Everything's going wrong, and then something shows up at his door, and I would have never predicted what showed up at his door, but I love it so much. I love this story so much. After that thing shows up at his door, you kind of just watch him rediscover his love for life, and those are my favorite kind of books to read. I think of them as so sweet and heartwarming. This book is beautifully written. Gabrielle Zevin knows how to write a book that will make you cry and break you into 10,000 pieces and then put you back together again. She is just such a fabulous writer, and you have to read it with a highlighter or something. I was taking pictures of every page. I was writing quotes down in my notes. I have not read a book with quotes that have impacted me so much in such a long time, but this book really did it for me. It's written in third-person point of view, but Gabrielle Zevin gives you insight into the mind and the thoughts of every single character in this book, even not the main ones, so you really feel like you know everyone on such an intimate level, and you feel so integrated into this world and this story. It allows for such good connection to the characters, and these characters are not perfect. She tells you their flaws, but then she explains why they do what they do, so it allows for so much empathy. The book is just beautiful, flawless, fantastic. The ending killed me and broke me and made me sob, and I hate her so much for it, and I hate this book so much for it, but I feel like I can't put aside all the amazing, wonderful things about this book. I love it and I hate it, and it's 5 stars because every word is the right one and exactly where it should be. And then for the last book I read this month, I read Lightlark by Alex Astor. This is the first book in the Lightlark series, and it's a romantasy where every 100 years the centennial occurs, and it is when an island called Lightlark that's covered in storm opens up, and it allows the rulers of 6 different realms to go there and compete to break the curses that were put on all of them. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this book. I read it recently. I finished it like 2 days ago, so I'm still trying to understand my feelings and thoughts about this book, but I ended up giving it 3 stars. I feel like it's very middle of the road for me. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, and I did thoroughly enjoy it. I feel like this book did a good job at entertaining me and keeping me interested. The plot twist at the end got me. I was shocked. I believed all the lies in this book, but I have to say I do feel like it was very similar to a lot of other fantasy books that I've read. I feel like it took a lot of inspiration from ACOTAR, The Hunger Games, books like that. I haven't even read that many fantasy books. Those are like the only ones I've ever read. I feel like the characters were maybe not created as deeply as some other characters that I've read, and the romance happened a little bit quickly. It didn't really feel as believable and as real as some other books that I've read. It doesn't take away from the fact that it was entertaining. That doesn't ruin this book, but it doesn't make it the most flawless, perfect book I've ever read. I also noticed while reading it that there were a few plot holes, specifically a few things that happened earlier on in the book, but then were forgotten about later on in the book, which I remembered, and I was like, hold on, that's confusing because that already happened. Also, the main reason I picked up this book is because I love trials and fantasy novels, and I've heard that this one has trials, so I read it, and there definitely were trials. It was mainly at the beginning of the book and not a huge part of this book. I personally feel like I've read books with better trials. This one didn't really have the stakes to have trials in it. Like, there was no really important reason for losing or winning these trials. It kind of just felt like something you put in the plot to spice it up. Did not really feel like it was necessary or an integral part of this plot, and it probably could have been removed. But that's my overall review of this book. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I'm still contemplating that rating. I'm contemplating everything. This book is a very difficult one for me because on one hand I was entertained, on another hand I have some difficulties with the basis of this book. 3 stars just feels like the perfect middle ground. But those were the 7 books I ended up reading in the month of September. I feel like I had a really good reading month. I read a lot of good things. I got a 5-star read, which is always a win. Let me know what books you read this month, what books you're excited to read coming up. Let me know if you read any of these and your thoughts on them. And thank you so much for watching. I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye!